The moment I caught my reflection in the kitchen window, I knew something was off about today. Call it women's intuition, or maybe just years of experience reading people, but even as I arranged 7 perfectly pink candles on my daughter's birthday cake, I couldn't shake the feeling that this celebration would change everything. I'm Cameron, and I've spent the last decade building the life I always dreamed of. Successful architect, loving mother, and what I thought was a solid marriage. But lately, the cracks have been showing, like hairline fractures in a foundation you've trusted for years. "Mommy, is it time yet?" Tessa's voice pulled me from my thoughts as she bounced into the kitchen, her party dress swishing around her knees. "Almost, sweetheart. Why don't you help me with these last decorations?" I handed her a string of fairy lights, watching her face light up brighter than the bulbs themselves. The doorbell rang, and Dean's voice carried from the entryway. "I'll get it." He sounded cheerful. Too cheerful, like someone trying to mask something else entirely. Guests started flowing in, filling our modern open-plan home with chatter and laughter. Avery, my mentor, arrived early as always, pulling me into a tight hug. "You've outdone yourself," she whispered, surveying the transformed living room with its cascade of balloons and twinkling lights. "I learned from the best," I replied, remembering how she'd helped me navigate both my career and single motherhood before Dean came into our lives. The party was in full swing when I noticed Dean checking his phone for the 1,000th time. He kept glancing at Natasha, his business partner, who'd arrived fashionably late in a dress that seemed more suited for a cocktail party than a child's birthday celebration. "Everything okay?" I asked Dean, touching his arm lightly. He jumped slightly. "Perfect. Actually, I have an announcement to make later." My stomach dropped. "An announcement? Dean, this is Tessa's day. Trust me, it's good news for everyone." His smile didn't reach his eyes. The cake moment arrived, and we gathered around Tessa. Her face glowed as we sang, and for a moment, everything felt right. She closed her eyes, made her wish, and blew out all 7 candles in one determined breath. "Before we cut the cake," Dean's voice rose above the applause, "I have something important to share." I froze, knife hovering above the first slice. Tessa looked up at me, confusion clouding her features. "As many of you know, Cameron and I have been discussing our future lately." He hadn't discussed anything with me in weeks. "I've decided it's best if I take sole ownership of the house, for Tessa's stability, of course." The room fell silent. I felt Avery's hand on my shoulder, steadying me. "Dean," I said, my voice surprisingly calm, "maybe we should discuss this privately." "No need," he continued, pulling out some papers from his jacket. "I've already started the process. It's better this way, trust me." I set down the knife, careful not to let my hands shake. "Actually, I have something to share too." I walked to my office, aware of every eye following me. When I returned, I carried my own envelope. "Since we're making announcements," I said, meeting his gaze, "you should probably take a look at these." Dean's face changed as he opened the envelope, color draining as he flipped through the photos. Him and Natasha, outside various hotels, text messages, bank statements. "You might want to check your own stability before trying to take mine," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Then I pulled out one final paper. "By the way, this is an eviction notice. You have 30 days. Natasha stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. Several guests gasped. Tessa pressed against my side, and I wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "Mommy," she whispered. "It's okay, baby. Sometimes grown-ups need to sort things out." I turned to our guests. "I'm so sorry about this. Please enjoy the cake. Tessa's been looking forward to sharing it with everyone." Dean stormed out, Natasha close behind. As the door slammed, I felt something shift inside me, not breaking, but strengthening, like steel being tempered in fire. Avery appeared at my side with 2 plates of cake. "You know what they say about revenge? That it's best served cold?" I managed a small smile. "No," she handed me a fork. "That it's best served with chocolate cake and good friends who have your back." As I watched Tessa giggling with her friends, seemingly recovered from the drama, I realized this wasn't the end I'd feared. It was just the beginning of something else entirely. Something stronger, braver, and completely on my own terms. The party continued, minus two guests who wouldn't be missed. And as I caught my reflection again in the window, I saw something different this time. Not uncertainty, but determination. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't just about getting even, it's about getting better. 2 weeks before the birthday party disaster, I was working late at my architecture firm when the first red flag appeared. A text message from an unknown number. "You should know what your husband is doing." I almost deleted it, assuming it was spam. Instead, I found myself staring at those words until my screen went dark. When I got home that night, Dean wasn't there. Again. "Working late," read his text. "Big project with Natasha, don't wait up." I tucked Tessa into bed, reading her favorite story about a brave princess who saved herself. As I kissed her goodnight, she asked, "When is Daddy coming home?" "Soon, baby. He's just very busy at work." "With Miss Natasha?" Tessa yawned. "He's always with Miss Natasha." My blood ran cold. Even my 7-year-old had noticed. The next morning, I called Avery. We met at our usual coffee spot, the one with the oversized armchairs and jazz music playing softly in the background. "I need your honest opinion," I said, sliding my phone across the table. "Am I being paranoid?" Avery read the message, her expression darkening. "Have you noticed anything else?" "Late nights, secret phone calls, password changes on his phone." I stirred my untouched coffee. "And Natasha's been at every business meeting for the past 3 months." "Honey," Avery leaned forward, "you're an architect. You know better than anyone that when something doesn't look right, it usually isn't." That afternoon, I did something I never thought I'd do. I hired a private investigator. Sarah was discreet, professional, and came highly recommended by Avery. "I can have preliminary information for you within a week," Sarah said during our meeting. "But are you sure you want to know?" "I need to know," I replied, "for Tessa's sake as much as mine." The evidence started rolling in 3 days later. Photos of Dean and Natasha entering hotels, receipts from romantic restaurants, text message records that made me sick to my stomach. But it was the financial documents that really caught my attention. "There's something odd about these transactions," I told Sarah during our follow-up meeting. "These numbers don't add up for a normal business relationship." "Want me to dig deeper?" Sarah asked. "Please. And I need it all documented properly. Every detail." That weekend, Dean announced he was going on a business trip. I smiled and packed his favorite shirts, knowing exactly where he was really going. The Grand Marina Hotel downtown. With Natasha. While he was gone, I received an unexpected visitor. Andres, one of Dean's business associates, showed up at my door looking troubled. "Cameron, I hope I'm not overstepping," he said, shifting uncomfortably in our living room. "But I've noticed some irregularities in our recent project budgets." "What kind of irregularities?" "Money moving between accounts that shouldn't be connected. Projects with inflated budgets, but minimal actual work." He pulled out a flash drive. "I've been keeping records." I felt my hands trembling as I took it. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because I respect you, and because what they're doing isn't right." Andres stood to leave. "Just be careful how you use this information. People like Dean and Natasha, they don't like being exposed." That night, after Tessa was asleep, I sat in my home office reviewing everything. The photos, the messages, the financial records, each piece fitting together like a perfect, horrible puzzle. My phone buzzed. Another text from Dean. "Missing you and Tessa. Be home tomorrow." I didn't reply. Instead, I called Avery. "I need your help planning something," I said when she answered. "How do you feel about making a statement at a birthday party?" "Oh, honey," I could hear her smile through the phone. "I thought you'd never ask." The next day, I made 2 crucial stops. First, to my lawyer's office to file the eviction notice and begin divorce proceedings. Then to a print shop, where I had everything, Every damning photo, every incriminating message, every suspicious financial record, professionally compiled into a neat package. As I drove home, my phone rang. It was an unknown number again. "Is this Cameron?" a woman's voice asked. "My name is Giselle. I'm Natasha's wife, and I think we need to talk." I pulled over, my heart pounding. "I'm listening." "I have information about what they're really doing with the company money," Giselle said, "and I want to help you take them down." I gripped my steering wheel, watching the sun set over the city skyline. Everything was falling into place, but not in the way Dean and Natasha had planned. "Meet me tomorrow," I said. "I think we have a lot to discuss." As I hung up, I felt that same steel resolve from my childhood strengthening inside me. Dean thought he could take everything from me, but he'd forgotten one crucial detail. I'd built myself up from nothing once before. And this time, I wasn't alone. Giselle looked nothing like I'd imagined. Sitting across from me at the quiet corner table of a downtown cafe, she radiated a calm strength that reminded me of my grandmother. The same woman who'd raised me to never let anyone determine my worth. "I've been tracking their movements for months," Giselle said, sliding a leather portfolio across the table. "At first, I thought it was just the affair, but then I noticed the money." I opened the portfolio, my architect's eye immediately drawn to the patterns in the numbers. "These are systematic transfers." "Exactly. They've been siphoning money from legitimate projects into ghost accounts." Giselle's hands trembled slightly as she reached for her tea. "Natasha thinks I don't understand finance. She forgets I used to work in forensic accounting." "Does this connect to the Wellington project?" I asked, remembering Andres's concerns. "It's their biggest scheme yet. They're planning to announce it at next week's investor meeting." Giselle leaned forward. "They've already embezzled nearly $2 million. My phone buzzed. A text from Dean. "Working late again. Don't wait up." I showed it to Giselle, who smiled sadly. "Natasha sent me the same message 10 minutes ago." "They're not even trying to hide it anymore," I said, shaking my head. "How did we miss this for so long?" "Because we trusted them. Because that's what you're supposed to do in a marriage." Giselle's voice hardened. "But trust isn't a blank check for betrayal." We spent the next hour combining our evidence. My photos and messages merged with Giselle's financial records, creating an airtight case against both Dean and Natasha. "There's one more thing," Giselle said, pulling out a final document. "Natasha's been pressuring Dean to transfer your house solely into his name. They're planning to use it as collateral for their next scheme." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. "That's why he's been asking about the deed lately. They need clean assets to secure more loans." Giselle's expression softened. "I'm sorry, Cameron. I know how hard you worked for that house. I thought about the years of overtime, the sacrifices, the pride I'd felt when I finally bought it. My grandmother used to say that some people mistake kindness for weakness." Smart woman. She also said the best revenge is living well and letting karma do its job. I pulled out my phone and dialed Andres's number, putting it on speaker. "Cameron?" He answered on the second ring. "I was just about to call you." "Are you still willing to help?" I asked. "They're meeting with potential investors right now," he said. "I've got copies of everything they're presenting. It's all fabricated." "Perfect." I looked at Giselle, who nodded. "Can you get those to my lawyer within the hour?" "Already on my way." After hanging up, I turned back to Giselle. "We need to time this perfectly. Tessa's birthday party is in 3 days." "You're going to confront them there?" Giselle raised an eyebrow. "In front of everyone?" "Dean's planning to announce the house transfer at the party. He wants witnesses to make it seem legitimate." I started gathering the documents. "But he's not the only one who can put on a show." "Count me in," Giselle said firmly. "It's time they learned that karma has helpers." That evening, I picked up Tessa from her dance class. She twirled into the car, full of 7-year-old energy and innocence. "Mommy, can Miss Natasha come to my party?" she asked. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Why do you ask, sweetheart?" "Daddy said she's like family now." Tessa buckled her seatbelt. "But she makes you sad. I see it in your eyes." Sometimes children see more than we give them credit for. You know what, baby? After the party, things are going to be different. Better. Promise? I promise. I met her eyes in the rearview mirror. And you know Mommy always keeps her promises. At home, I spent hours organizing everything into a presentation that even a child could understand. Photos, messages, financial records, all clearly labeled and dated. I added Giselle's evidence, Andres's documents, and the final piece. The eviction notice. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Avery. Package delivered to your lawyer. Everything's ready, I texted back. Thank you for everything. Looking at the finished product, I remembered my grandmother's words from years ago. Baby girl, sometimes life hands you bricks meant to break you. Use them to build something stronger instead. That's exactly what I was doing. Building something stronger, not just for me, but for Tessa, for Giselle, for everyone who'd ever been betrayed by someone they trusted. I sealed the envelope and wrote Dean's name on it in my architect's precise handwriting. Then I added a small note. Karma sends her regards. The stage was set. In 3 days, at what Dean thought would be his moment of triumph, everything would change. And this time, I wouldn't be the one losing everything I'd worked for. Sometimes the perfect revenge isn't about destroying someone else's world. It's about protecting your own and letting justice take its natural course. The silence after Dean's announcement felt like a physical weight in the room. I could see Natasha's smug smile from across the space, her hand clutching her champagne glass a little too tightly. They thought they had won. They were wrong. Actually, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the stunned quiet, I have something everyone needs to see. I pulled out my envelope, noting how Dean's confident posture faltered slightly. Cameron, this isn't the time, he started, but I cut him off. Oh, I think it's exactly the time. I turned to address our guests. Since my husband wants to discuss property ownership at our daughter's birthday party, let's talk about what else he's been doing with property, and money, and trust. I began distributing copies of the evidence. The room filled with gasps and whispers as people started flipping through the pages. What is this? Dean's face had gone from confident to ashen. Where did you get these? You really should be more careful about hotel security cameras, I said, pointing to a particularly clear photo of him and Natasha entering the Grand Marina. And about sharing passwords with your daughter's iPad. Natasha stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous. Dean, we should go. Not so fast, a new voice called out. Giselle stepped forward from where she'd been quietly observing. I think the investors would be very interested in page 12. The financial records are particularly enlightening. The color drained from Natasha's face. Giselle? What are you doing here? Supporting my friend, Giselle replied coolly. And protecting my assets. Did you really think I wouldn't notice $2 million missing from our accounts? Andres stepped forward next, holding up his phone. I've just forwarded everything to the SEC. They're very interested in the Wellington project discrepancies. Dean lunged for the envelope in my hands, but Avery smoothly stepped between us. Touch her, she said quietly, and I'll add assault to the list of charges. You can't prove anything, Dean snarled, but his voice shook. Actually, I pulled out the final document. I can prove everything, including your plans for this house. The house I bought, with my money, from my career. I handed him the eviction notice. You have 30 days to find somewhere else to live. Mommy? Tessa's small voice cut through the tension. She stood near the cake, looking confused and worried. I crossed the room to her, kneeling down to her level. Remember how we talked about telling the truth being important? She nodded solemnly. Well, sometimes grown-ups forget that. And when they do, there have to be consequences. Like when I lied about eating cookies and had to go to bed early. A ripple of nervous laughter went through the room. Something like that, sweetheart, but bigger. This is insane, Dean shouted, waving the eviction notice. I'll fight this. With what money? Giselle asked sweetly. The accounts are already frozen. The SEC makes sure of that when they suspect fraud. Natasha made a break for the door, but two men in suits stepped in front of her. "Ms. Harris," one said, showing his badge, "we'd like to ask you some questions about certain financial transactions." The party dissolved into chaos after that. Guests quickly made their exits, some stopping to hug me or whisper words of support. Dean and Natasha were escorted out by the SEC agents, their protests fading down the hallway. Through it all, I held Tessa close, shielding her from the worst of it. Avery organized the remaining guests into a cleanup crew, while Giselle handled the questions from curious neighbors. "Is Daddy in trouble?" Tessa asked as I cut her a slice of cake. "Yes, baby, he is." "But not because of you? Never because of you?" "Because he lied?" "Because he made bad choices." I smoothed her hair. "But you and me? We're going to be just fine." Later that night, after Tessa was asleep and the house was quiet, Giselle and Avery sat with me in the kitchen. Three women sharing a bottle of wine and the weight of what we'd done. "To karma," Giselle raised her glass. "To justice," Avery added. "To truth," I finished, clinking my glass with theirs. My phone buzzed. A text from Andres. "SEC wants to meet tomorrow. Dean and Natasha are in custody. You did it." I showed the message to the others. Giselle's eyes welled up with tears. "I never thought I'd feel relieved to see my wife arrested." "It's not the ending we wanted," Avery said gently. "But maybe it's the ending we needed." I looked around my kitchen, my house, my life, my choices. Dean had tried to take it all, thinking I would break. Instead, I'd remembered who I was, the girl my grandmother raised to be strong, the woman who built her own success, the mother who would do anything to protect her daughter. "You know what the best part is?" I said, refilling our glasses. "We did this legally, ethically. We let their own actions be their downfall." "The perfect revenge," Giselle smiled. "No," I corrected her. "The perfect justice." Outside, the city lights twinkled like stars, and for the first time in months, I felt truly free. The SEC's office felt colder than it needed to be, probably designed to make people uncomfortable. I sat across from two investigators, their faces professionally neutral as they reviewed the documents spread across the conference table. "Ms. Harris claims you fabricated these records," the female investigator, Agent Torres, said without looking up. "Of course she does," Giselle replied from beside me. "Just like she claimed our joint accounts were mismanaged, rather than stolen from." Agent Torres's partner, Agent Reed, leaned forward. "We've confirmed the hotel footage is authentic. The financial records match our independent investigation. But there's something else we need to discuss." He slid a new document across the table. I recognized the letterhead. It was from one of my firm's biggest clients. "This project," he pointed to a line item, "was supposedly managed by your husband's company, but the money trail suggests something more complex." "What do you mean?" I asked, though my stomach was already nodding. "It appears Ms. Harris was using this project to launder money from other sources that might have connections to less legitimate businesses." The room seemed to tilt slightly. "Are you saying Natasha was involved in organized crime?" Agent Torres finished. "We believe so, and your husband may have been knowingly or unknowingly helping her." Giselle's hand found mine under the table. "That's why she was so insistent about getting control of clean assets," she said quietly. "Like Cameron's house." "Exactly," Agent Reed nodded. "They needed legitimate collateral to cover their tracks." My phone buzzed. A text from Avery. "Tessa's asking for you. Everything okay?" I quickly replied, "Be home soon. Bigger than we thought." The meeting continued for another hour, with the agents taking detailed statements. When we finally emerged into the late afternoon sun, Giselle looked as shell-shocked as I felt. "I thought I knew her," she whispered. 7 years of marriage, and I never suspected." "Neither did I admitted. "With Dean, I mean. We see what we want to see sometimes." My phone rang. An unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Cameron?" It was Andres, his voice urgent. Dean's trying to access the company servers remotely. He's deleting files. What? How? I thought he was in custody? Made bail an hour ago. Listen, I'm trying to stop him, but there's something else. Something about a backup plan involving Tessa. My blood ran cold. What about Tessa? I overheard him talking to his lawyer. Something about emergency custody papers filed last week. He's trying to take her. I was running to my car before he finished speaking. Call Avery, I ordered. Tell her not to let Tessa out of her sight. I'm on my way. Giselle jumped into the passenger seat as I started the engine. I'm coming with you. If Natasha's involved in what they say she is, you might need backup. The drive home was a blur of red lights and horn blasts. When we pulled up to my house, Dean's car was already in the driveway. He's here, I breathed, throwing the car into park. Call the police, Giselle said, already dialing on her phone. I'll get Agent Torres. We rushed to the front door, finding it already open. Inside, Dean was facing off with Avery in the living room, while Tessa clung to her leg. You have no right to be here, I announced, my voice steady despite my racing heart. I have every right, Dean snarled, waving papers at me. Emergency custody order, signed by a judge this morning. Based on what? Avery demanded, keeping herself between Dean and Tessa. Based on her unstable behavior, the public humiliation at the party, the false accusations. You mean the truth? Giselle stepped forward, her phone recording everything. The truth about the money laundering? About Natasha's connections? Dean's face went pale. What are you talking about? The SEC knows everything, I said, moving closer to Tessa. About the real sources of the money, about who Natasha really works for. You're lying! But his voice cracked. Daddy? Tessa's small voice cut through the tension. You're scaring me! Something flickered in Dean's eyes. Fear, maybe regret. Before he could respond, police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Last chance, I said quietly. Walk away now, or face everything that's coming. He looked at Tessa once more, then at the papers in his hand. Without another word, he turned and fled through the still open door. Moments later, police cars screeched to a halt outside. Agent Torres emerged from one of them, looking grimly satisfied. We got him, she said. And this time, no bail. I held Tessa close, feeling her small body trembling against mine. It's okay, baby. It's over now. But as I watched the police cars pull away, Giselle's hand on my shoulder, and Avery calling our lawyer, I knew it wasn't over. It was just changing into something else, something that would require even more strength to navigate. Because sometimes the biggest battles come after you think you've already won. The courthouse hallway buzzed with tension as I sat on the hard wooden bench, watching Tessa color in her favorite princess book. Our lawyer, Maria, paced in front of us, phone pressed to her ear. They're trying to make a deal, she said, finally hanging up. Dean's lawyer wants to meet. Now. What kind of deal? I asked, instinctively pulling Tessa closer. The kind that suggests they're desperate. Maria checked her watch. They're in conference room B. Avery appeared around the corner, coffee in hand. I'll stay with Tessa. I kissed my daughter's forehead. Be good for Aunt Avery, okay? Can we get ice cream after? Tessa asked, not looking up from her coloring. We'll see, baby. The conference room felt like a pressure cooker. Dean sat with his lawyer, looking considerably less polished than usual in his orange jumpsuit. Natasha was notably absent. Where's your partner in crime? I couldn't help asking as I sat down. Dean's lawyer, a sleek man named Patrick, cleared his throat. Ms. Harris is unavailable, which brings us to our proposal. I'm listening. I folded my hands on the table. My client is willing to sign over all claims to the house and withdraw the custody petition, Patrick said, in exchange for your testimony being modified. Maria leaned forward. Modified how? Remove any mention of certain financial connections. Focus solely on the affair and the company embezzlement. You mean ignore the money laundering? I laughed incredulously. The criminal connections? Think about Tessa, Dean suddenly burst out. Do you want her to grow up knowing her father was involved with— Don't you dare use our daughter, I cut him off. You lost that right when you tried to take her. You don't understand what these people are capable of. Dean's voice dropped to a whisper. Natasha, she's disappeared. They're cleaning house. A chill ran down my spine. Before I could respond, the door opened and Agent Torres stepped in. Sorry to interrupt, she said, not looking sorry at all. But we just got some interesting information from Ms. Harris's wife. Giselle followed her in, holding a laptop. Found these in our safety deposit box, she said, placing it on the table. Natasha kept records of everything. Insurance, she called it. Dean's face went ashen. You can't. Already did. Giselle opened the laptop. Every transaction, every meeting, every threat. She recorded everything. Patrick stood abruptly. This meeting is over. Sit down, Agent Torres ordered, unless you want to be charged as an accessory. He sat. Here's what's going to happen, Maria said, her voice steel-sharp. My client will testify to everything she knows. Your client will plead guilty to all charges. In exchange, we won't add witness intimidation and attempted kidnapping to the list. You're making a mistake, Dean said, but his shoulders had slumped in defeat. No, I stood up, gathering my things. My mistake was trusting you. This is justice. As I turned to leave, Dean called out, What about Tessa? I paused at the door. She'll know the truth, that her father made bad choices, but her mother stood up for what's right. That's the legacy I'm choosing for her. Back in the hallway, Tessa was showing Avery her finished coloring page. Look, Mommy, the princess saved herself. Just like real life, Avery winked at me. My phone buzzed. A text from Andres. Company board meeting emergency session. They want you to take over Dean's position. I showed the message to Maria, who smiled. Poetic justice. More like karma, Giselle said, joining us. The SEC just seized all of Natasha's offshore accounts. They're talking about victim restitution. Agent Torres appeared one last time. We'll need you both to testify next week. The DA is confident about the case. Will we need security? I asked, thinking of Dean's warnings. Already arranged. But honestly, these types usually scatter once their money trail is exposed. They're not interested in revenge, just protecting their assets. Tessa tugged at my sleeve. Can we get that ice cream now? Looking at her hopeful face, I made a decision. Actually, how about we all go? Ice cream and then pizza at our house? Our house, Tessa repeated happily. Just ours now, right, Mommy? That's right, baby, just ours. As we walked out of the courthouse into the bright afternoon sun, I felt lighter than I had in months. Our little group, Tessa, Avery, Giselle, Maria, represented something I'd forgotten existed. A chosen family, built on trust and truth, rather than lies and manipulation. My phone buzzed one last time. A text from an unknown number. You did good, kid. N. Natasha, reaching out from wherever she'd disappeared to. I deleted the message without responding. Some chapters needed to stay closed. You okay? Avery asked, noticing my expression. Better than okay? I smiled, watching Tessa skip ahead of us. I'm free. And in that moment, with the sun warm on my face and my daughter's laughter in my ears, I knew that sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting free. The courtroom fell silent as I took the witness stand. Dean sat at the defense table, his expensive suit unable to hide how much weight he'd lost in custody. His eyes pleaded with me, but I focused instead on Tessa's drawing in my pocket, a reminder of why I was here. Please state your name for the record, the prosecutor began. Cameron Mitchell. And how do you know the defendant? He's my soon-to-be ex-husband. The next hour passed in a blur of questions and evidence. I described discovering the affair, finding the financial discrepancies, and uncovering the money laundering scheme. With each detail, Dean seemed to shrink further into his chair. And what happened at your daughter's birthday party? The prosecutor asked. Objection! Dean's lawyer jumped up. Relevance? Goes to state of mind, Your Honor, the prosecutor countered. Shows premeditation in the defendant's attempts to secure clean assets. Overruled. Continue. I described that day, watching the jury's faces as they heard how Dean had tried to steal my house in front of our daughter's friends. Several jurors shook their heads in disgust. And after the party? He tried to take my daughter. My voice cracked slightly. He filed false emergency custody papers, broke into our home. That's not how it happened, Dean suddenly shouted, standing up. Order! The judge's gavel cracked like thunder. Mr. Barnes, control yourself or you'll be removed. During the break, I found Giselle in the hallway. She was scheduled to testify next. Natasha's been found, she said quietly. In Mexico. They're extraditing her next week. Are you okay? Better than okay. She showed me her phone, a news article about her new position as CFO of a major corporation. Turns out being a whistleblower has its perks. Back in the courtroom, Giselle's testimony was devastating. She methodically outlined every transaction, every shell company, every illegal deal. The evidence from Natasha's laptop sealed it. Spreadsheets, recordings, emails that implicated not just Dean and Natasha, but their entire criminal network. During cross-examination, Dean's lawyer tried to paint us as scorned women out for revenge. Isn't it true, he asked Giselle, that you and Ms. Mitchell conspired to destroy your spouse's reputations? No, Giselle replied calmly. The truth destroyed their reputations. We just refused to keep lying about it. The prosecution's final witness was Andres. He described how Dean and Natasha had pressured him to falsify documents, threatening his job and family when he hesitated. They said they had connections, he testified, people who could make problems disappear. I was scared, but... He looked at me. Someone showed me that doing the right thing matters more than being afraid. During closing arguments, I sat between Avery and Giselle, holding their hands as the prosecutor summed up weeks of testimony. This isn't just about embezzlement or affairs, she told the jury. This is about people who thought they were above the law, who used their families as shields while they committed crimes, who tried to steal not just money, but homes, children, and futures. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. On the count of conspiracy to commit fraud, how do you find? Guilty. Money laundering? Guilty. Attempted custodial interference? Guilty. With each verdict, I felt years of tension releasing. Dean stared straight ahead, his face blank. Before sentencing, he was allowed to speak. He turned to face me. I'm sorry, he said, his voice rough. Not for getting caught, for forgetting who you were, who we were, for thinking you were someone I could control instead of someone I should have cherished. The judge sentenced him to 15 years. As they led him away, I thought about Tessa, waiting at home with Maria, about how I'd explain this to her someday. Outside the courthouse, reporters clustered with cameras and microphones. Giselle squeezed my hand. Ready? I nodded, stepping forward to the microphones. Today isn't about revenge, it's about truth, about showing our children that justice matters, that doing the right thing matters, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Later that evening, I sat with Tessa in our backyard, watching the sunset. She was drawing another princess picture. Is Daddy going away for a long time? She asked. Yes, baby, but not because he doesn't love you, because sometimes grown-ups have to face consequences for their choices. She considered this, adding a crown to her princess. Like when I have to sit in time out? Something like that? I pulled her close. But you know what? We're going to be okay. More than okay. My phone buzzed. A message from Avery. Board meeting tomorrow at 9. Ready to take over as CEO? I smiled, typing back. Ready for anything. Tessa held up her drawing. The princess wore a hard hat and carried blueprints. Is that me? I asked. No, silly, it's me. When I grow up, I want to build things like you do, but better. I hugged her tight, thinking about karma, justice, and the way life sometimes comes full circle. You already are, baby. You already are. The morning sun streamed through my office windows as I reviewed the final paperwork. The Wellington project would be my first major development as CEO, and I was determined to do it right. Mom! Tessa burst through the door, still in her karate uniform. I got my yellow belt. That's amazing, sweetheart. I pulled her into a hug, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo. Where's Aunt Avery? Right here. Avery appeared in the doorway. Someone was too excited to wait in the lobby. My phone buzzed. Giselle. Turn on the news. Now. I grabbed the remote, switching on the office TV. Natasha's face filled the screen as she was led into a courthouse in handcuffs. International fugitive Natasha Harris was extradited today, the reporter announced. Sources say she's agreed to testify against her criminal associates in exchange for a reduced sentence. Is that Dad's friend? Tessa asked, her voice small. Former friend, I corrected gently. Remember what we said about choosing good friends? She nodded solemnly. Like Aunt Avery and Aunt Giselle. Exactly. A knock at the door interrupted us. Andres entered, carrying a thick folder. The investors are here early, and you'll want to see this first. I opened the folder to find a letter from Dean, forwarded from my lawyer. My hands trembled slightly as I read, Cameron, the guards let me watch Tessa's school play on video. She was amazing as the brave knight, just like her mother. I've signed the final divorce papers and included a letter for Tessa to be opened when you think she's ready. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just trying to do one right thing in all this wrong. Dean, everything okay? Avery asked, noting my expression. Better than okay. I tucked the letter away. Ready to show these investors how we do business the right way? The boardroom was packed when we entered. I recognized faces from the trial, people who'd doubted me, who'd sided with Dean initially. Now they looked at me with respect, maybe even a little fear. The Wellington project was born from corruption, I began, but we're going to transform it into something meaningful. Affordable housing, community spaces, sustainable design. That's less profitable than the original plan, someone objected. Actually, Giselle stepped forward, pointing to her projections. Ethical development has better long-term returns and zero chance of criminal charges. Scattered laughter broke the tension. As we walked through the presentation, I could feel the energy in the room shifting from skepticism to excitement. This isn't just about buildings, I concluded. It's about legacy. What do we want to build? Who do we want to be? The vote was unanimous. As people filed out, Andres lingered. Remember when you first hired me? He asked. I was terrified of standing up to Dean. You showed me another way. You showed yourself, I corrected. Sometimes we just need permission to be brave. That evening, I hosted dinner at my house. Our house. Giselle brought wine, Avery made her famous lasagna, and Tessa proudly demonstrated her new karate moves. Watch this, Mom! She executed a perfect kick. Careful of the... A crash interrupted me as a photo frame hit the floor. But when I picked it up, I had to smile. The broken frame had held my wedding photo. The glass had shattered, but underneath was Tessa's drawing of her architect princess. I can fix it! Tessa ran for her art supplies. No need, baby. I removed the wedding photo, placing her drawing in the frame instead. Sometimes breaking things leads to better things. Like our new family? She asked. I looked around at these women who'd stood by me, who'd helped me rebuild more than just a career or a home. Exactly like our new family. My phone buzzed one last time. A message from Maria. Natasha's testimony closed the last loophole. It's really over. Over. Such a simple word for such a complex journey. But as I watched Tessa teaching Giselle her karate moves, while Avery documented it all on her phone, I realized it wasn't about things being over. It was about things beginning. Mom, can we have ice cream? Tessa asked. After dinner, I promised. We have to do things in the right order. Like building a house? She grinned. Foundation first. Smart girl. I pulled her close. Want to help me design the community center for Wellington tomorrow? Her eyes lit up. Can I draw a princess tower? Better, Giselle chimed in. Draw a superhero headquarters. For brave people who tell the truth? Tessa asked. So, exactly, I said, meeting Avery's knowing smile across the room. For people who build things right, who stand up for what's right, who make the world right. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even or getting free. Sometimes it's about getting it right and showing others how to do the same. That's not just karma. That's legacy.